Managers, what's the worst thing someone did to get fired? So, hired a guy who had interviewed virtually. Nice guy who had a great resume and credentials for the job. I was excited to have him join the team. He wound up being very productive, pleasant, and a great fit. I thought I knocked it out of the park with hiring him. My company moved back to a hybrid schedule for local employees at the time, and before I even got to the office, 7 people messaged me complaining about his body odor. When I arrived, I nearly fainted. I didn't know human beings could smell like that. Genuinely, one of the foulest smells that I've experienced. I brought him into my office and asked if something was going on, if there was a medical situation or something I needed to be aware of. He just assured me he forgot to shower. I told him to go home and take care of it. He came back 2 days later and somehow smelled worse. This continued to happen for 3 weeks and people were ready to riot. I had to temporarily move him to a back office because a pregnant employee got sick due to his body odor. I tried to get approval for him to work remotely, but our company's CEO wouldn't approve it. After repeated warnings, I fired him. The security guard who escorted him out asked our office manager for a mask with an exhalation valve before walking him out, while he was right there beside him. I managed to catch a glimpse of him, and the look of humiliation, shame, and embarrassment, it was rough. Really cool guy who was decent at his job, so I felt kind of bad, but my God, that crap was nasty. Next story. I was the senior director of IT for a publicly traded bank. I left to start my own company, got a call 3 months in asking me to come back to physically help identify servers that were in a secure area. Weird, but okay. These are big machines, about the size of dishwashers. At the time, in the late 90s, each one of these computers had cost $500,000. They were backups filled with account data and every type of secure transactional log for bank, daily Fed wires to checking account data, personal loans, you name it. Well, he didn't even purge them. He just literally took them home in a truck, set them up in his living room, and was using them online for his gaming. When I got to the bank, I could not find the servers and pulled the guy aside with law enforcement where he confessed. The Treasury Department, Secret Service, and FBI went to his house and took the servers back, and I've never seen or heard from him again. Next story. A guy at my work was fired after only 2 weeks. During those 2 weeks, he did a lot of things to annoy people, repeatedly resulting in him being called into our boss's office to be told, "Don't do that." It was annoying/stressing our boss to constantly have to tell this guy not to do very obvious things. One day, my boss calls him into his office for another chat. My boss isn't sure if he's going to fire him yet, but he is going to see how the chat goes. The guy starts off the conversation with, "Hey boss, you really need to relax." And my boss says, "You're right, you're fired." And the dude had unknowingly recommended his own termination. 2 weeks later, he came back to the office to try to convince our boss that our boss had made a mistake firing him. That didn't go well. Next story. I was the director of a county museum with a staff of 12. I had a security system installed that included cameras and recorded each time the exterior doors opened and closed. The museum was open on weekends, and a young woman was the regular receptionist those days. About 2 weeks after the system was installed, I decided to check and see if it was accurately working, so I printed out some of its standard reports and checked the weekend videos. I was astounded to see the weekend receptionist get up and leave the building without locking it and setting the alarms. She returned in a few minutes with her boyfriend. They unlocked and took some money from the donation box, then left for lunch. Again, she did not lock up or set the alarms. The museum was open to the public and left unattended. A few people did come in and wander around the exhibits and left. One kind person even left the admission fee on the receptionist desk. About 2 hours later, the couple returned, nuzzling each other, and went into the ladies' bathroom together. They emerged 20 or so minutes later, arranging their clothes. Obviously, they had been in the ladies' room having sex. The boyfriend left, and the employee sat down at the receptionist desk and put her head down to nap for the next hour. Again, 2 people came in, and she didn't even wake. When she came in the following Friday to get her check, I told her she was fired. All of us really liked this employee and thought she was an honest person, but she had no qualms about leaving the museum wide open for hours. You see, we had the coded alarm system before, but never the ability to know when the museum doors were open or locked. And so she argued with me until I showed her the video. She wasn't aware the new system had been installed and there were now cameras in every room. Next story. We had a lady forcing herself to be invited to a supplier event in Italy. After being accepted and receiving an invitation, she forced the supplier to invite also an intern of the company. So she goes to the event and they enjoy a day of conferences in a nice hotel, great lunch, and even better dinner. The next day, they don't show up for the continuation of the event. And once spotted by the supplier, she says they prefer offered to enjoy the day sightseeing. The supplier calls me furious. I know she was at the event as we paid for the airline tickets and booked her hotel. However, we don't have interns. Supplier says that he has proof that we have an intern. Okay, show me the intern, show me the photo, and it's her husband. Next story. I was the manager of an employee and the supervisor of that employee. The employee was having issues at home. His wife had developed mental issues and was struggling. The employee met with the supervisor to discuss the situation and ask for flexibility in scheduling as he navigated the issues and got help for his wife. The supervisor agreed and also offered to be an ear for the employee to talk about his issues with. The employee was grateful and over a few months opened up about some details of what the wife was going through. After about 6 months, the supervisor used information obtained from the employee to locate his wife while she was out shopping. The supervisor approached her, told her he was psychic and that upon seeing her, he had been overcome with the weight of her mental load. The supervisor used all the privileged information to fake that he had a close emotional connection to the wife, and the supervisor effed the wife for a couple of months before he was caught. When it all came out, we were surprised.
Alright, y'all. First off, hello, welcome to the video. But I would like to state that if someone did this to me, my knuckles are going to break and I will probably dropkick them. Not only are you trying to seduce this mentally ill woman, trying to be evil Sean Spencer, saying you're a fake psychic, you go banging her while you are consoling your employee? Hell no! I don't condone violence, but some people need to get punched in the face. So, maybe I did condone violence all along, but what a disgusting, slippery, slimy, lascivious human being, if you can even call him that. Next story.
Embezzlement. Seen it happen at 3 different jobs across a decade. The first time, it was my direct manager. She was led out of the office by security, her boss, and the VP of the entire company, big company, 5,000 plus people. She was kind of hated, and it was really surreal. They had to threaten to call the cops there for her to finally leave, and I think the police were involved. The worst one was the CEO of a small nonprofit. He was robbing Peter to pay Paul for years and spending huge sums of money on IT upgrades, like moving the membership system to a different platform to cover up the smaller but still large things he was doing. The company lost 3/4 of the staff in the office building, if I remember correctly, and still exists, but is virtually only with a skeleton crew now. Not sure why the people who stayed wanted to even stay at that point. Next story. I was the highest ranked person at a big back office building. I wasn't in charge, but kinda informally was, and there were repeated poops in the urinals. We had some footage from a bad angle that only showed some of the entrance to the bathroom areas. Security and I went over endless hours of people entering and exiting and could not match anyone to the urinal pooping. We suspected this one dude, but one day he left early before a poop happened, so it got even weirder. At this point, we are up to maybe 10 poops over 4 months. There are signs, warnings of discipline, people informing on others, mainly the dude, but I'd already ruled him out after some timing issues and his abscesses. Eventually, we figured it out that it was 2 older women working in tandem to poop frame this dude. Turns out they didn't like his politics and the 2 ladies formed this plan to get him fired without benefits. Instead, we had to have these ladies put on PEPs before eventually laying them off at the first opportunity. Next story. I was an assistant manager for a lawn and garden department in college, and we had to fire one of the seasonal girls because she would invite various love interests into the department on the 2 to 11 shift when no one was in at the store after 8 and hook up in areas that didn't have cameras. Me and my buddy caught her out behind the store with some guy with his pants down where we stored extra raking. She begged not to be fired, but policy is policy. She was awful anyway, so it was relief to get rid of her. We also had a cashier get fired for moving a nested waterfowl and was later arrested because she took the bird and the nest to her house. Next story. He started the week before Christmas and was a last-minute addition to the Christmas party. I say party because it simply involved everyone finishing early on the Thursday, because not everyone was in on the Friday, then traipsing to the pub a few doors down, the CEO putting his card behind the bar, and everyone getting effing annihilated. It was amazing. The new guy went too heavy too fast, though. He was ruined by 7 p.m. and we could tell he was one of those that couldn't handle his drink. That was the point he decided to walk up to the CEO and loudly declare, "You, mate, are an effing idiot," and laughed loudly at himself.
No one else laughed. You could have heard a pin drop. He walked in the next day and got escorted immediately back out. For the record, the CEO is not an idiot. He's legit one of the nicest people I've ever met. We're friends on LinkedIn, and I've had 2 jobs since then because of him recommending me to others. He's a top guy. Next story. Not super crazy, but I was a regional supervisor for a construction security company and supervised about 120 guards we had in South Florida. I had an employee named Yancy who worked at one of our most important sites with Lennar, our biggest client. I was suspicious, so 3 separate times I would show up unannounced to the construction site and he wouldn't be there. He was clocking in and then going home. After the 3rd time, I fired him and he begged for his job and another opportunity, but I said no. Fast forward a week later, the guard we replaced him with was unable to man the site, so against my better judgment, I called Yancy and told him we were willing to give him one last opportunity. I begged him not to make me look stupid for vouching for him. That very night, not even 3 hours into his shift, he disappeared, left the site, turned his phone off, came back 3 hours later and tried to tell me he was there. Fired him, didn't pay him for the day, and he blew my phone up because he wanted the money he thought he deserved. Some people really don't deserve second chances. Next story. I was a supervisor at a call center for one of the world's biggest brands. It took some effort to get a job here. We usually only hire those with experience and references. Well, we hired this guy and he got fired on his first day out of training. He went through 4 weeks of training and seemed normal enough. Day 1 at his cube doing his actual job? Well, he took his pants off on the call floor. He said it was hot. It wasn't. We had a ridiculous air conditioner. And even if it was, you don't whip your balls out to your coworkers. He genuinely didn't understand what he did wrong. Next story. He just ghosted us. He did not appear for his work appointments, did not respond to any work emails or text messages or phone calls, did not ask for time off or sick leave, nothing. Just disappeared. Left his personal items in his office, even a few open snacks and a half can of Coke on his table. We finally heard back from him about 2 weeks later. He said that he had back pain. None of us believes him though, unless he was in a coma or some traumatic accident. I just don't understand how during the entire 2 weeks he cannot even send us a text message. Our bosses are very lenient with giving time off too. It was bizarre. Next story. For my team specifically, one employee made consistent personal purchases on the corporate card over the span of a month. I only caught it because of expense report reviews. I asked him why and he didn't have much of an answer. Usually it would happen because their personal cards resembled their corporate card, but I guess that wasn't the case here. Another employee committed time card fraud. We're in the office Monday through Friday, and our policies state that hourly employees must clock in at their desks or at an ADP kiosk once they're on campus. This employee was clocking in from home, commuting about 15 minutes to the office, then clocking out after returning home. I caught it because our time card software captures IP addresses. Now, I don't micromanage time card punches. I trust my employees to do the right thing. Because of that, it took me about 4 months to notice. The punches showed a T-Mobile IP address instead of our Spectrum Business Network. Before the termination meeting, I gave him an opportunity to come clean by asking whether I'd find additional instances if I looked back further. He said no. So I checked before the meeting and found that he had, in fact, done it multiple times. So he also lied about it. He was terminated on the spot. Next story. The funniest I've ever seen was at my one job years ago. I worked as an office admin for a janitorial company, and oh, I have stories. But one that really stands out is we had a contract for a recycling facility. The client came to us as it wasn't once, but like 5 times. I don't know why they didn't tell us after the first time, where she was stealing cans from the recycling facility. She got her partner/husband or whoever to come pick up cans for her in his work truck. Company logo and all exposed on camera. Then she proceeded to take those same cans and recycle them during the day for money back at the same facility. I remember she came in to talk to HR and all I could hear was her saying, "Was that wrong? I thought they were garbage." The whole plant is recycling. That's what they do, is recycle cans, and you know that you are not to touch the cans. Yes, that was wrong, and you know better. "Oh, sorry, should I return the money back, as I've spent it already?" And that's what I had to go out back as I was laughing in shock. People are wild. Craziest I've ever heard of was a cook at a casino in my city was caught dropping ladles of grease on a grease fire that went up the wall and burned down the kitchen. Casino evacuated. She was charged with arson. Next story. I worked a grain mill with a bloke that we can call Scott a few years back. Scott started the same week as me. First, he tried to convince everybody that my general courtesy meant that I wanted to smash. I was the only woman on site.
Then the tantrum started, and I'll call one of our team leaders Craig. Scott had an issue with Craig that none of us could figure out, but he would go out of his way to pick fights with Craig constantly. Then he was caught walking along the top of a shipping container outside of the fall cage. Then the morning crew discovered a 2-inch deep gouge in a steel I-beam and reviewed the cams to see that he was Tokyo drifting one of the forklifts the night before. He was finally fired after we hired some after-schoolers. They would come do simple tasks like sewing feed bags shut. The industrial sewing machine used to break down all the time. We all knew it was a bit crap, but still, when it breaks down on those 15-year-old kids, Scott, a father of 7, feels the need to absolutely verbally eviscerate the poor kids. One of them refuses to come back to work, and the next day, Scott's pulled into the owner's office. We worked out he'd been sacked when he did a burnout in the company car park about 20 minutes later. Scott should at least be 50 by now, but I hope he's grown up. Next story. I run F&B and operations for large hotels. I had just finished an investigation into a bartender/bar supervisor who was going against policy and remaining on his supervisor pay during his shifts. The additional pay was designed so he wouldn't take too much of a hit for scheduling, inventory, etc., and this was communicated clearly. The restaurant GM was out indefinitely with a major non-work-related injury, so I was picking up his slack. I finished the conversation about clocking back to the server code after he finished his supervisory tasks and went my merry way. For about 10 feet. Then another one of the bartenders pulled me aside to thank me for addressing her major concerns with them. He had apparently been trying to negotiate BJs for better schedules with the women in the department for several months. She had her receipts for reporting it to the GM, so I fired 2 people the next day. It was a wild decision by both of them. The GM did very well and the bartender was making close to $175K a year before you factored in the supervisor pay. Next story. I managed a furniture store. Our customers had a set payment amount, say $80 a month, but their last payment would be less than normal. Frequently, they'd send in a full final payment or forget that they'd made all of their payments and keep paying, leaving their account with a negative balance. We had to call them and return the money. If, for whatever reason, they didn't claim the money after 90 days, we had to remit the money to the state, who would then return it to the customer. An assistant manager named Matt started cashing out the balances without calling the customers. He would put the money in a jar in his desk. We got paid bonuses for bringing delinquent accounts current, so he'd use the money to strategically make payments on past due accounts, earning himself bonuses. He was getting away with this until one day when a customer went into his office and returned with some cash that she put into the drawer. I asked what she was doing, and she told me that she had just made a payment on an account. I asked where the money came from, and she said, "Matt's money jar." And it didn't take me long to figure out what was going on. He wasn't surprised when I fired him. He was surprised when the cops met him at the door. Next story. Chain restaurant. Dude had been there for 2 or so days, still in training, not officially on the rotation yet. In that time, he managed to get into an argument with the general manager about what his duties were. Later claimed he didn't know she was the GM, despite the fact that she wore a fancy golden name tag with general manager printed on it, comes in on day 3 smelling of alcohol. Helped himself to some of the food, out front without paying, right in front of the manager on duty. Asked one of the servers where the takeout plasticware was, got angry at the server when she didn't know because it wasn't part of her job, takeout was handled by the host, and started yelling. Got into a fist fight with a second server who had stepped in to protect the first one, got tackled to the floor by an ex-military manager, and eventually limped out never to be seen again. The cops were called, but he was gone by then. Thankfully, it was a super quiet day. Next story. My company used to have a spring party celebration every year after we completed the busy period. It was a work day that we all got off. We drove to work and they put about 1,000 of us on buses and take us somewhere to have a party. It was a big deal with a ton of free alcohol, food, and music. Administrative assistant who had worked at the company for less than 3 months got obliterated at this event. She is hitting on every male employee within arm's reach and being very handsy with them. People kept trying to control her but gave up. On the bus ride back to the office, she continued to drink and made the bus driver pull over so she could pee on the side of the road. Once the bus parked back at the office building, she went into her office and passed out on the floor. Someone used her phone to call her boyfriend to pick her up, and she wasn't employed the next day. Next story. I had a coworker who stole a colleague's wedding ring when she took it off to do some cleaning task. Everyone knew that she had stolen it, but she wouldn't fess up. Eventually, her boss told the whole team that they'd be going down to the police station on Wednesday to do lie detector tests, which was a bluff, obviously, and suddenly, the ring turned up in a drawer that had been searched several times before. HR wouldn't let the manager fire her for that, but she was on a performance improvement plan that said that she had to give 24 hours notice before an absence. She got busted shoplifting from Walmart the next weekend and couldn't make it to work on time as a result. There was no notice, so she got the can.
Okay, I can forgive the lying, the stealing of the wedding ring, the interference of a marriage, the racism, but I draw the line at stealing from Walmart, okay? You don't do that. That is a safe space and sanctuary for meth heads and weirdos like myself. I'm not a meth head, but I am a weirdo, okay? You don't desecrate the sanctity of Walmart. It's not cool. Okay, I'm feeling better now. I got that out of my system. Next story.
So she was a new hire, stealing from the cash register, while I, her manager, was on vacation. There were only 2 of us on the register, and she waited until I was gone to steal the money. But we still weren't sure if she was taking cash or just really bad about making change. The really wild part was, we had a local police officer, just a friend of the owner, stop by, and he pointed to the fire sprinkler on the ceiling and asked her, "Do you know what that is?" And she shook her head no, and he said, "It's a camera. Do you know what it got on film last week?"
She nodded and answered, "It saw me taking money from the cash register."
And she was fired on the spot. Next story. I used to manage a McDonald's that was a part of a long-standing franchise group. The owner was the OG operator in the area, and he was part of the local business association. Because of his standing in the community, he had house accounts at some other local businesses for things his stores might need. One was a hardware store. This wasn't super well known outside management, but the maintenance crew knew. We had one maintenance dude who did work on all the stores, and in-store dudes who did the minor stuff. The OG guy told my store's new maintenance dude, who charged over $1,200 at the hardware store on tools. The invoice came in for the hardware store that month, and everyone lost their crap. The hardware store and the owner settled the account and closed it. The maintenance dude wound up going to jail for that and some local thefts. He used the stolen tools that he took from the hardware store to commit them. The property bought from the store was considered theft because no receipts were submitted, and the property never entered my store. Next story. I was never technically a manager, but I'm the owner's daughter and did a little bit of everything, including staffing decisions and training. We had a young guy throw a hissy fit on his first day when we told him about our very loose dress codes and that how he was currently dressed didn't fit. He had showed up wearing cut-off jean shorts, very distressed style, and a black hoodie with his hood up. I said he could learn the warehouse today so he didn't need to go change out of shorts, but he'd have to take his hood down. And he refused to even take his hood down. Basically, no one was allowed to wear shorts. Everyone was required to cover their shoulders, and no hats/hoods were allowed indoors. Long pants, no athleisure, and either a short-sleeved tee-blouse or long-sleeved tee-blouse, sweater, sweatshirt. Jeans were permitted. Tidy-looking sweatshirts were permitted. Any kind of hairstyle was permitted as long as it was tidy. We had bald staff, indigenous male staff with braids down to their butts, staff with colored hair of every shade. Heat was never an issue because our building was always freezing. The butcher's shop was even colder. Even in the middle of the summer, I wear long sleeves and a scarf/shawl around my neck. Most staff wore the braided soft-shell jackets or vests that we gave away at Christmas, and my dad and grandpa wore wool slacks with layers of t-shirts, wool, flannel, button-down, and vests over top. And we had extra warm clothing for any staff who needed to work in a cold environment, coolers, freezers outside. So when I told this new guy that he'd have to meet the dress code when he showed up tomorrow, and that if he needed any clothing, we would help him, he launched into a string of curses that would curl your hair. He also called me a racist. He is indigenous, my family is not. Like I said though, if he needed a pair of jeans, say we would have let him take a pair of jeans and would have taken the cost minus his 25% staff discount from his first check. A pair of .0 jeans at that time might have cost him $45 max. If we didn't take him exactly as he was, we were unreasonable F-heads. If he hadn't quit on the spot, we would have fired him.
Okay, I have a question, everyone. What if this guy was fat? Hear me out. I grew up chubby as a kid, and you know what the chubby kid always wears? The insecurity hoodie. Maybe he didn't want to take it off. Or maybe, well, that's the only theory I have. I don't know. You don't call somebody racist for asking, but he was indigenous. Well, no, fat people can be indigenous. Okay, we're good. My theory checks out. Yeah, he was fat and insecure like me as a young child, and he didn't want to take off the insecurity hoodie. And he's indigenous. Solved it. Next story.
So, not a manager, but at my SO's job, a security guard was caught having sex with a patient. He tried to claim that she had just come onto him, which, to be fair, was a thing she had done in the past, and he didn't want to hurt her by fighting her off, and that it had literally just started. Well, he conveniently left out that the incident just so happened to occur in a security camera blind spot. Very shortly after, one of the other guards would have physically checked that area. This was at a mental health inpatient facility, mostly for adolescents. Next story. Had a new hire show up to a remote position that came with a company truck. Guy seemed a little off, but got him all set up with the truck and had him take the rest of the afternoon off to get situated in his hotel room. Next morning, one of my superintendents comes in to tell me that a company truck in the parking lot smells heavily of weed. Turns out it was the new hire. We were working in Wyoming. He had driven the afternoon before to go to Colorado to buy weed. The hiring manager had paid for this guy's first week in the hotel, bought him a pair of work boots, and driven him to the site from the airport because he was broke until his first paycheck. Guy admitted to smoking in the truck on his way to work, and he was terminated on the spot. Then he asked if someone could give him a ride to return the work boots so he'd have cash for the trip home. Needless to say, nobody offered to help. Next story. Not the worst, but the saddest. I was a low-level manager at Walgreens at the time. There was a new hire that was really good. He came in early, worked hard, and was friendly, etc. Well, turned out he was coming in early so he could spray himself with a spray-on deodorant from the shelf before his shift. He had to skateboard to work since he had no other transportation and was trying to cover up his sweat smell since it was summertime. If he had just asked us, I would have bought one for him. But unfortunately, I had to help the store manager review the security camera since I was the most familiar with how the system worked. If I had been able to review the tape solo, I would have hit it, honestly. But since my boss was there, she saw it and had to fire the guy. Really sad. Dude was really understanding about it too. Next story. You know when you travel and you're at the airport, you check in for your flight and go through security, then you wait around until you discover which gate your flight is operating from. You get the gate number and have to walk there. Lots of boring corridors with windows. These tend to be populated by various planters with assorted plants growing. Anything to break up the monotony of the long walk. If you work at the airport, maybe as a baggage handler, don't discreetly plant marijuana seeds in several of the planters and visit them regularly to make sure they're being watered and hopefully not discovered and removed. Also, don't mention what you've done to others on your shift, especially when you disappear for a few hours and come back with a glazed over look, smelling of tobacco and Jamaican woodbines. Then, when the management gets a bit suspicious, don't keep on doing it, especially when somebody from airport security is detailed to follow you from a discreet distance and see what you do. After he'd been escorted off the airport, we investigated 3 planters he was seen tending, but for the following 4 months, we found another 6. Next story. So this isn't the worst, but it is the funniest. I work at a major chain of automotive parts. Long story short, you probably know the place. We have a coworker. We respect the man, we trust him. Every day he comes in high as a kite. It's not cannabis, but we think it's like that. The man is also shamelessly queer as hell. Our regional manager comes in one day, inspection. From the get-go, he's a piece of crap. Walks right up to the line of sexual harassment with my 2 coworkers, berates us for not matching standards he imposes, which he can't follow and still function, and just an a-hole all around. Then, eventually, my coworker comes in, looks at this guy, and shadows him all day. Regional thinks he's a good kid, got his head on straight, calls him a slur anyway. So imagine you're a queer man of color who just got insulted to your face, who is watching your coworkers get harassed. And also, you're high as a kite. What do? Well, my coworker put his drugs in the regional's backpack, said he stole a brownie or some crap from the guy, gets berated for stealing the man's food. Regional demands he get fired on the spot, so naturally we ask, hey Regional, why does our guy look high from eating your food? Suffice to say, the Regional got replaced a week later. Maybe HR believed the story, maybe they couldn't get anything else to stick, but my coworker got fired and rehired 6 months later. Called the whole thing better than any trip I've had, he said. Wow, this is genius and gay and beautiful. You planted, why don't we plant more fake evidence on evil people? That's a joke, by the way, legally speaking. I don't want Undersmart getting in trouble again. But, sexually harassing coworkers or inferiors, subordinates, that's the word. Sexually harassing those, that's not a good look. So maybe I'll turn the other way about the planting of evidence. Anyway, next story. Okay, so I wasn't a manager at the time, but I work in security, and if any of you know security, you know we get all types of weirdos. Years back, we had a guy on our grave shift, and when I tell you this guy was a weirdo, I mean weird by security standards. Nice guy, but just really weird. He was there for about 3 months before getting fired for, checking my notes here, biting his toenails at the security concierge desk. To provide a vivid image, he would put his foot down on the desk while seated and lean in there for a nibble. Who knows how long he was doing this before one of the engineers came in early and caught him with his shoes off. I did get to be there when the footage was reviewed to verify the claim, and honestly, I'm a little jealous of the guy's flexibility. Next story. So, guy didn't show up or call and missed Friday, Monday, and Tuesday. Shows up Wednesday. said his doctor discovered cancer on Friday. He got an appointment at the Mayo Clinic on Saturday. He knew someone that worked there. Got treatments at the Mayo Sunday and Monday. And on Tuesday, his local doctor told him he was now cancer-free. During the investigation to find out why he was out without notice, we found out that he hadn't been to an off-site project he was managing for over a month, yet wasn't in the office when he was supposed to be at the project. Easy termination. Next story. I had a coworker tell my boss one time, "You can't fire me." She was a moron. A danger to customers, giving not just bad information, but information that will directly result in grievous bodily harm. She was argumentative, whiny, always nagging coworkers about stupid crap. When she endangered a customer a second time, another coworker and I who had seen it went to our boss, so we were there when she got pulled in. Boss explained that he was going to have to fire her because she was a massive liability to the company. And she said, with a straight face, "You can't fire me. I'm a black Muslim woman." And it's true. His bosses had been telling him for months that he couldn't fire her because she could make up some bullcrap and sue the company for discrimination. But the instant that she had the gall to pull the race, sex, and religion card all in the same conversation, my boss was done. I think he'd have physically removed her if she hadn't scurried, terrified, out the door when he just pointed at the door, glowered angrily, and shouted, "Get out!" She never did sue. Yes, she was full of crap about that too. Next story. It's never what they did to get fired, it's what they didn't get fired for. Sometimes you can't fire someone. I had the most useless guy on my team. People picked up his slack all the time. He refused to even do the most basic tasks. He mouthed off to supervisors, started conflicts with his coworkers, said racist and inflammatory things all the time. Just a completely useless sack of crap. We couldn't fire him. There was always a reason HR found to not fire him. The most infuriating thing on earth is when he threw a tantrum, stormed off site, and HR told me I can only fire him if he doesn't come to work tomorrow. And so I prayed to whatever God there is that he wasn't going to show up. And he did. The only day he was ever on time, too. This actually happened the same day I turned my 2 weeks notice in, at the same job. We were getting a second manager who was going to help with my workload, but because I was leaving, he was just going to replace me. He was going to be hybrid, and my team members weren't really happy about that. Despite this, I tried to really cheerlead for this guy and get them to be excited about someone, admittedly, way more experienced than me. And just when I thought I succeeded, he sent an adult website link to the entire department on Teams before deleting the message. Then all of a sudden it was, "Great, we have to drive all the way here and work our asses off and he gets to whack it at home?" And to my knowledge, he didn't have any consequences for it because he was brought in by our new director, and he was a creep too. Next story. They ran untested code in production that was meant to clean up unused phone lines. Unfortunately, it cleaned up all the phone lines. Every last one. Thousands of phones critical to the function of the corporation, all dead. This was a time where phones were still super important. Not that they aren't now, but back when this happened, there was an order of magnitude more important, and they were immediately fired, and the entire tech division, not just the telecom department, spent the next week or so fixing and testing all the phones. All hands on deck. It was a total crap show, but we did get it fixed. Next story. OMG, it's my favorite story. So I was a hotel manager. My boss employed an ENTP man as a handyman. During his first day of work, he demanded a buffet breakfast because he needed to gather the strength for work. When he was given instruction on how to fix something, he called the employer dumb and said he will do it himself. He ended up posting on his private social media about signing up a contract for the hotel, a contract that was worth hundreds of thousands. He didn't sign a contract. It was a government project handled by our employee, which was strictly forbidden to be announced anywhere. The day he got fired, he said it's good because he's too awesome to work for such a lame person. Next story. I worked as the manager of a recreation center that was attached to the local police department in the same building. Had a guy who was hired as the front desk receptionist, and he was so nice and cordial and good at his job. One day, though, I walk in and the cops are at my office area and ask me to look at surveillance of the gym and the rec center from the night before. My guy was filming an entire rap video in the gym, strobe lights and smoke machines included. The cops didn't stop him, but just showed me the next day, and I was forced to fire him. His grandfather came by a few hours later and asked why his grandson was fired for no reason, and I showed him the video, and he just said, "That boy's getting his ass kicked," and then left.
So, nobody's asking the important question. Was the rap video good? Did it get a lot of views? Did he go viral at least? Did he finish filming it? I mean, if you're gonna get fired for it, at least make it worth it. They fired me. They silenced me. I can't rap. I don't know how to do that. Anyway, next story.
Okay, I've got one. It was when I was a teenager, but I worked for a full-case grocery warehouse. I helped train new people since I was pretty good at picking and packing stuff. We were doing day one with some new hires, and I was going to be in charge of them after they finished all the onboarding stuff with HR, safety management, etc. Fast forward to their first break, probably around 10 a.m., and one of the guys makes a beeline out to his truck. One of my coworkers comes to me and says, "Hey, I don't know exactly what I saw, but it sure looked like that guy was doing something sketchy in his truck. I swear it looked like he was snorting something." And sure enough, he comes back in from break and is wired. He can't sit still, he's twitching constantly. I mentioned to my pal in security that the guy might be on something and asked what we would do. He said he'd check in on him and ask him if he's all right. Worst case, we had a nurse on site who could do drug tests if we had reasonable suspicion. So my pal walks over to him and gently asks if he's doing okay, and the guy flips out. He yells something incoherent, then turns around and vomits all over the ground. And so he becomes more panicked and sprints out the building back to his truck. We were worried about letting him drive, but my friend said we didn't have authority to physically detain him. So we let him go, but notified police of what happened, in case he got into any kind of collision after speeding out of the parking lot. And that was many years ago, but I remember telling my non-work friends that I had an exciting day because of one of my trainees snorting drugs in his truck, puked all over, and fled the premises in a drug-induced panic. Classic Kentucky. Next story. I'm one of the senior leadership at my company. He was a mid-level manager who worked for me, and he started racially bullying one of the entry-level people on his team. The entry-level guy in question was from another country with a bit of a different culture than America. The manager repeatedly found backhanded ways to call him stupid, poor, and backwards, occasionally in front of other team members. Example, when the entry-level team member made a mistake one time, the manager asked him, "Don't they have schools in your country?" Another example was the team member in question had a long beard, and the manager in question told him he needed to shave it because it looked ratty and gross. When the team member told him he couldn't shave it because it had cultural significance, the manager doubled down and told him unless he shaved it, he had no future at the company. Lots of incidents like that starting pretty immediately after the new manager started. It all went unreported for a few weeks because the entry-level guy was worried about his job, but one of his fellow team members brought it to me, and I flipped the F out. My company is very explicitly progressive, and in particular pro-diversity. So bullcrap like that has absolutely no place here, and there is no way the manager didn't know that. But beyond the fact that his beliefs and behaviors showed him to be a racist piece of crap, they also showed him to be a crappy manager. He should never have been given employees feedback on their appearance in the first place. But the second an employee said cultural, he should have dropped it like a hot coal and run begging forgiveness to HR. He put the company at so much risk through his vile action. So anyway, I took it to HR, who were equally furious as me, and they positively flew through the investigation and his termination. He was suspended by the end of the day and terminated by the following. It still pisses me off thinking about it. Next story. Tame compared to some of the stuff in this thread, but 3 people got fired for having sex. At the same time, 2 dudes were double-teaming a girl upstairs in the HVAC fan rooms. Didn't seem to know, or I guess care about the security cameras or the patrolling facility security officers. Another time, at the same job, one of said security officers got fired and put on the registry for standing behind one of our female employees and self-pleasuring. Oh, and another time, one of our technicians got fired for saying some super racist crap to our safety manager, who was African American. Fired on the spot for that. Security teams tried to escort him off the premises, but he ran from them and hopped the fence out of the campus. Didn't have a car, so he literally just ran away. Next story. I was working at an after-school program for an elementary school when I was 20. One of my coworkers just disappeared one day. Never came back. I eventually heard that before his shift started, his parked car basically was right outside the front door to the school. He got high with something, wasn't told, but probably weed, and then he left this on his passenger seat and then passed out. And I think slept through the start of his shift. I think one of the managers recognized his car and went out to get him and found him like that. They obviously sent him home immediately and he never came back. He was one of the staff in charge of a group of some 80 or so 4th and 5th graders. A little fuzzy on details because it was a secondhand story from 10 years ago, but that's the gist of it. Next story. I do IT, and a user was getting a new laptop, and part of my job was to set this laptop up for the user. I'm doing my usual process, checking apps and updates and blah blah blah, when I see massive amounts of money listed in several emails, outgoing to some rando email addresses. User was phished, and she ended up sending $5.8 million overseas to who she thought was the VP of Finance. They recovered none of the money, and she was let go immediately, while arrogantly screaming across the building, "But it's the VP and he promised me a bonus!" Next story. Oh boy, take your pick. I've fired a lot of people. These are the most egregious. Woman fired for organizing an orgy during sales kickoff. She actually pulled it off, but shamed enough people, including me, her boss, for not wanting to take part in it. 4 or 5 people went to HR the next day. Spent the next week having to document some really uncomfortable conversations. Turned out to be quite the event. Guy fired for selling cocaine and ecstasy at sales kickoff. When we told him, he didn't deny it, just owned it and headed to the airport. Guy fired for drugs and trying to hook up with employee at sales kickoff. I really liked the guy too. Had a reputation for enjoying too many Tito's and soda with a bit of a bump for good measure. Went too far with it one night. Guy fired for stalking and harassing woman at sales kickoff. This was a sad one. Guy just couldn't handle his booze and possibly drugs. Great guy, great family. Didn't really remember it the next day. No idea how he told his family. And what do all of these things have in common? Sales kickoff is an important event, but Jesus, some people can't control themselves when on a business trip. 2 drinks, then go to bed. Don't bring drugs. Don't try to hook up with your colleagues. Have 2 drinks, go to bed, and make everyone's lives easier. Next story. As someone who used to run a weld shop, I've fired a lot of people for a lot of different reasons. Mostly drugs, alcohol, and violence related. Getting welders to behave is like herding cats. But one in particular that stands out was a new hire that didn't seem that off, but maybe a little weird, but he had a good resume. I started him Tuesday or Wednesday and he was fine. He's getting the hang of things, doing steady work and coming in on time, seems like a normal employee. Anyways, he leaves on Friday and drops off the face of the earth. I called him several times, no answer. Oh well, it happens. They either bail on the job, get arrested, or something else like that. Very common for weld shops. Wednesday rolls around and he shows up on time. Maybe a little early, but he's red as an effing tomato and blistering. Literally the worst sunburn I have ever seen. He looked like that guy in Chernobyl who they forced to look into the reactor. He also had a hospital band around his wrist, and I call him into my office to have a little chat, and he tells me the most amazing tale. Him and his brother went fishing on a little boat and the motor stopped working. So they decided to get drunk and wait for another boat to pass them by. Then they passed out in the sun. The tide carried them out to sea off the coast of South Carolina, where they stayed adrift for several days until the Coast Guard picked them up and took them to the hospital. I was ready to let this go. It was a legit reason for a no-call, no-show, extenuating circumstances and all. What got him fired was when I told him he had to go home because he was literally covered in blisters and very obviously still had a fever. He lost his absolute crap and started screaming at me.
So you had the actual extraneous circumstance. Your dog actually did eat your homework. And then when your superior, your teacher, your person above you buys it, you get mad anyway? Bro, you got away with it. Do you remember in Better Call Saul when they actually lied to Lalo and you're like, oh my God, he bought it? Like, you got away with it and then you fumbled it anyway. You went past the finish line and then ran backwards. Oh my God. Anyway, next story.
Okay, so I wasn't really a manager, but I was the senior person on site. I worked for a company which sold computer systems to a specific type of small business. It was a hardware and software package where we would fly out, set up the equipment and software, and then spend 2 to 3 days training the staff on how to use it. Typically, this was a solo job. This time, I had a new hire, Joe, shadowing me so he could see how it's done. Dude was completely disengaged the entire time. I can't imagine he learned a thing. Shortly after we left, the customer called in and told us that she found pictures on one of the computers that we had just set up of this guy with no shirt on, which he had uploaded to hotornot.com. Dude was fired instantly. He lived in our hearts as a JPEG Joe. Next story. This will date me a bit, but early in my career, we had a lady running a Beanie Baby business on eBay out of a state agency office. I should note this was union position. All of this happened around over 6 months, but she was caught, given a warning, caught a second time, given a warning, caught a third time, got written up, sent to mandatory training, and browser was uninstalled off of her Windows 98 machine. Didn't need her for a job. Then caught a fourth time, having snuck in copy of the browser on a floppy disk. Got a serious warning. We removed the floppy and CD drive from her computer. Caught a fifth time, browser on USB key. Second serious warning. USB drives on our computer filled with hot glue. Mouse and keyboard were PS/2 and AT and unaffected. Caught a sixth time, using a coworker's computer. Second write-up, attend mandatory training again, and transferred to a filing job with no computer access. Then caught a seventh time using a different user's computer. Got a very serious warning and moved to a newly created receptionist role away from computers. In the public foyer, forbidden to leave the desk except for lunch or restroom breaks.
Caught an 8th time while on restroom break. This time logging into the computer of a lawyer who was on vacation who had protected and confidential documents on their machine in an area she was not authorized to access. Finally fired. Union appealed, and they dragged their feet for another several months, insisting she be reinstated, and right before going arbitration to the Attorney General of the state to let it be known that they could drop the appeal or they would throw the book at her for criminal trespass, misuse of state resources, and illegal access of confidential documents.
Next story. We had an employee who was mad there was only one stall for ladies and one stall for men. They were only one-person bathrooms, and keep in mind, these are employee only and in the back of the restaurant. So one day, another female employee was doing heroin in the bathroom, which was upsetting the other female because she wanted to take a crap. So she thought it would be funny to crap on the floor right outside the door, so when the heroin-using employee walked out, she would fall in it. Well, she didn't fall, but also didn't notice that she stepped in it, so me and two other managers witnessed her junky ass walk through the kitchen, trailing human crap everywhere. There were cameras just outside the bathroom. Both of them got fired. And I just couldn't believe my eyes watching the footage. The serial pooper's defense was, if y'all can't provide multiple stalls, I'ma crap on the floor. And we did have other bathrooms for guests up front that they were able to use if needed. Also, nobody really cared if you used the men's bathroom. Both were the same 4x4 room with a sink and a toilet. Next story. I have two. While I was working at a tech support call center for cell phones, a guy was fired because he used our remote software to log into his customer's phone and open her Facebook account, change her password without her permission, and then went home that night and started sending wang pics to any underage girls on her friends list. Then the second was when I was working at a local news station. One of our new hires would open adult content websites and casually watch hardcore gay adult videos on his second monitor in the center of the building, a room that every employee had to walk through to get to the other parts of the building. He was only fired when the station manager walked in and saw him do it. He was fired from his last two jobs for doing exactly the same thing. Even worse, he was a rehire. He was fired from the same job before for the same reason. Next story. In the military, I lived in a dorm with my unit, enlisted people, and a few other smaller units with people I didn't know aside from their last names. I was quiet, and I heard that one guy in another unit actually became angry about that. Now, I worked in an admin/personnel office. I was sitting in my office, and I was alerted by the door manager that there had been a death threat made by some guy, and the guy was yelling and screaming, going berserk. Now, seeing gossip, I excitedly asked who the guy wanted to kill, and she looked at me and said, "You!" She reported it to the first sergeant, who promptly drove to the dorm and kicked the guy out. He was gone by the time I got home from work. Also, he had damaged government property. They investigated and were shocked when I said that me and the guy had never even spoken. When his commander asked for a reason, he said it was because I never say anything. What? Making a death threat and destroying property over complete nonsense? Oh yeah. And I got his discharge paperwork too. Next story. Not a manager, but guy at my last company got fired for a multitude of things. Showed up drunk to prospect/customer calls regularly, called team members during work and after work while drunk and shirtless, took much younger team members to strip clubs, gave them coke, and tried to get a hooker for one of them, drunkenly and soberly made sexual remarks to several female team members. Married guy, by the way, often had far too many drinks at company events. I heard he once threw up at a customer dinner. Ended every drunken phone call with, "If you tell anyone about this, I'll just deny it." When expensing meals on travel, he would always get T-bone steaks and several whiskeys from the highest-end steakhouse in the area. My boss once showed me a $1,500 expense report for a 2-day trip. I learned it was a bit of an open secret that he had called people drunk after he did it to me. The only reason it took him so long to get fired, though, he had been there for 15 years, was because he was bringing in a lot of big deals and was actually good at his job. But I guess his goodwill ran out after enough people saw him for what he actually was. What did him in was that he and the VP of sales, they hated each other to the point where HR decided it was best for both of them to leave. Next story. I was a clinical director of a behavioral health company a few years ago. We sent therapists to the home to work with developmentally disabled children. One of our therapists decided mid-session to go and smoke a joint outside during his session. He left the front door wide open and the child unattended for 20 minutes. This child was severely disabled and could not be left alone.
When he came back, he stank of weed and fell asleep on the family's couch shortly after door dashing himself food and giving candy to the kid without asking about allergies or dietary restrictions. Next story. Not a manager, but the worst I've heard. Bus driver came in for a shift. It later transpired he had been partying all night and his boyfriend begged him to call in sick. The driver started driving. Sometime later, boyfriend phoned and said driver had been taking drugs. So driver is immediately radioed and told to pull over, shut vehicle down, and wait for a manager. The garage then receives another phone call from the same number as before. The person is obviously putting on a fake voice. Think of Ross as Vikram in Friends, and they say, "Hello, this is the police. Someone may have phoned you about Todd. Don't listen to them. They're crazy." And the manager went out and brought the driver back. We have drug swab kits for random and targeted testing that test for 7 varieties. He tested positive for 5. It should be noted in a separate incident, we had a young guy who admitted using cocaine up to 11 p.m. the night before who was tested around 11:30 a.m. and was totally negative. So a positive result means it's very recent or a huge dose. Next story. Not a manager, but an employee was fired and arrested at the car rental company I worked for. His mom called the front desk to ask when we were coming to pick up all the cars we've been storing at her house. She was mad it was ruining her lawn. You see, he was getting dropped off in the morning, leaving on his lunch break in a rental to get food, which pretty much everyone did, then returning his car. Dude had 20 cars parked on his mom's driveway, lawn, and backyard, telling her that we didn't have room for them, while he was renting them out to random people, his friends, etc. No idea how he got away with it long enough to accumulate that many, or why he would keep taking them if they were piling up like that, or why he would store them at his house, but frankly, he probably would have lasted longer had his mom not snitched. Cars were just assumed to have been picked up by other branches, sent to shop, and not inventoried as such yet. Okay, I gotta say here, if this person can get 20 cars spread across the lawn and the dealership or the rental company, pardon me, doesn't notice, I'm sorry, but y'all stupid. Y'all got some egg on your face. 20 whips, 4 Jeeps, 2 Lambos, a freaking SUV gone, and you didn't notice? The parking lot didn't look a little empty. I know what OP's explanation was at the end there, but 20 cars! Y'all need a better back-end system or something, or log your database better. I don't know, but 20 cars! He got away with it. You know what? Let him keep them. Let him keep them. Anyway, next story. So, I worked for a retailer. A new location was awaiting approval from the city for a liquor license. The alderman contacted our business. She asked us if we could give her nephew a job, and we did so in a way that implied that her approving of our liquor license depended on our answer, despite there being no reason to approve it. The owner agreed to hire the guy shortly after being given a job at my location. The nephew proceeded to steal $100 worth of cognac and cigarettes every day until I caught him. Normally, the guy would be fired immediately, but we were concerned that he might tell his alderman aunt a different story that could make trouble for us. So we prepared a large amount of evidence and sent it back to her and then fired him when he came in for his next shift. We made sure he gave back his key, but he had made a duplicate of the key. He came in after close one night to rob the store, but he didn't actually know that we have an app that tells us if someone disarms the system. So there's the alarm, and we manually activated the alarm within 2 minutes of him entering, and he ran out. We didn't contact the police. I wanted to because the whole ordeal reeked of corruption, but the owners didn't want to disrupt their business. Next story. So I managed a small air freight office at SeaTac Airport back in the mid-90s of 6 people. The weekends were pretty slow, so we rotated working the weekends. On Sunday, I stopped by at about 6 p.m. to grab something from my office, which was behind the main office. I walked in on the guy that was working that weekend screwing an obvious prostitute. This was the same area where the Green River Killer was picking up his victims. There were always prostitutes all along the main road where all the hotels and motels were. That was just a block away from the office. Next story. There was this smug a-hole I used to work with. He thought that because he was friends with the managers, he was better than me. Well, one day my manager calls me into the office and explained that someone had stolen all of the PS3 games. From the face, it looked like as if nothing was wrong, but once you opened them, they were empty. Only employees had keys to unlock them. And he said, "I'm giving you this one chance. If you admit to taking them, I won't press charges."
messages. And I didn't admit it because I didn't take them. I asked why they didn't look at the cameras, and apparently the only people who could were the district managers and remotely, and they weren't in that day. I told him to do what he thought was best, but reminded him I didn't do it. I was the only girl working there, and they always thought I didn't know about anything about movies or video games, and I wasn't a part of the friend circle. So he told me that I was fired for stealing and lying, and to expect the police at my door in the next few days. I said, okay, see ya. A few days later, I get a call from my boss apologizing. When smug a-hole came in, they were all laughing and making fun of me for stealing. Until my boss, who was laughing with them, I know because my friend was in the store when they were talking, said, now all we gotta do is wait for the district manager to come in with the footage so we can have proof and have her arrested. And that's when smug a-hole froze and said, we have cameras? Where? And boss showed him. Smug a-hole literally went to his car, pulled out a few shopping bags, and then dropped them on the counter, walked away without saying a word, and drove off never to be seen again. And so my boss called me apologizing, begging me to come back, and I said, F you, you're a POS, and so is everyone working there, picking favorites. If there hadn't been cameras, I might be in jail right now, and I hope you learn a lesson from this. And I hung up. Smug a-hole was prosecuted, but I don't know the outcome. Next story. Theft, for sure. One time, a retail store, my assistant manager would change the security tape and, in the meantime, pick up an item from the store and do a refund, take the cash from the till, and then put the security tape back in. Took quite some time as our inventory always had items missing, so no one would have guessed an employee was helping themselves to $10 to $25. Our loss prevention eventually saw this type of transaction a minute or two prior to open at least once a week and paid me a visit. Such a crap thing to realize your second in command does that. Unfortunately, had one more at a different store that would do the same thing but out of camera view. Stole quarters from our candy machines in the hundreds of dollars. And again, our loss prevention realized a loss on those machines every month. And the ASM must have been a bit too cocky one day and carried them or counted them in front of a camera. Who knows what makes people do the stupid crap they do, but I don't know. Next story. Not a manager, but was working at a call center selling auto and home insurance. To sell insurance, you have to be licensed by the state that you're selling in. So we had to be licensed in every state. Every state requires a background check with fingerprints, and we were all told this before we accepted the job. One day, we're on break and 4 Army MPs show up. Turns out that when they do a criminal background check, they look for military crimes, as well as local, state, and federal. One of my fellow trainees was AWOL for months, and this was how the Army found her. I can still hear her saying, "This is all just a big misunderstanding," as they dragged her out of the building. Next story. Attempted SA. Had a 40-ish-year-old guy on my crew who tried to take liberties with a 19-year-old young woman after trapping her in a secured satellite stockroom. Thankfully, I had some work I needed to do in there and caught him in the act. I pulled him off of her, decked him, and put my boot in his junk. Called my boss over the radio so the police would come. Gave the girl my own shirt so that she would regain some semblance of modesty before others came, since hers was badly torn from the assault. As for him, he was taken out in handcuffs. The girl went to the hospital, insisted that I go with her, spent the next 12 hours in the ER, and then the police precinct. The next night at work, I spent the first 4 hours of my shift with the senior store manager, my manager, regional loss prevention management, and regional HR. The crap bag, he got 10 years for attempted SA and SA as well, 3 years for battery, and 8 years for possession of a controlled substance found in his pocket when he was searched. The girl quit and entered counseling, then went to college and now works as an attorney and a victim's advocate. Next story. A guy on my team tried to F a coworker over by snooping their password, then came in early one day to log on their machine and deleted a whole ton of files off the file server. He was so focused on whatever petty bullcrap sabotage that he didn't think about badge logs, security cameras, or that the coworker on question was on vacation. We were able to recover everything pretty fast, and he was escorted out within a few hours after people came in and found their work missing. He's very lucky though, because I'd heard they were considering criminal charges, but decided against it since no actual damage was done and it was just a couple hours of downtime while IT restored everything. Next story. She broke down into a screaming fit at her coworker on a call because he corrected a factual error on her PowerPoint slide. To be fair, she had asked him to review the slides before the call and he hadn't bothered, but that wasn't the core issue. The call also had several of the customer's people on it. And the customer was an enormous manufacturer of electronic devices that we were trying to get our technology into. Like, you have all heard of this customer. And this was a $50 million sale we were all working on and were close to winning until this call that I was not on, and I woke up to 8 separate emails from other coworkers on the call saying, "Red alert, you gotta do something about this," and a 9th from a customer politely saying that they were going to pause our evaluation until we had our team dynamics sorted out. AKA, we lost the bid eventually. We even tried to work with her, but she refused to accept any responsibility for her meltdown. Filed harassment complaint against me with HR when I gave her a does not meet expectations rating in her annual review 3 months later. Mind you, this was for a job that paid $200K back in 2018, and she was considered a very senior individual contributor. So the expectations are definitely appropriate that you not lose your crap in private or in public about anything. They transferred her to another manager, and then HR asked me to verify the dates she had taken vacation over the previous 2 years that she had worked there, because it turns out she had logged exactly 0 days of PTO in the system, despite taking an appropriate 3 weeks each year. But this company paid out unused PTO when you leave, so HR basically threatened her with a fraud charge if she didn't resign with no payout or severance. Next story. I worked with a guy who was hard to get along with. Like, Jesus, Gandhi, and Buddha would lose their patience if they had to work with this guy. Anyway, homeboy used to have to hit the head immediately upon return to work after any time eating out. He made a big deal about it, so everyone knew the routine. We used to eat out as a team once per week, so one of the guys beat this particular coworker back to the office and put super glue on the toilet seat. An hour later, paramedics were hauling homeboy out on a gurney, face down with the toilet seat still attached to his butt cheeks. The guy who did it, super glue tube stuck to the palm of his hand. So, very easy to spot. Never saw that guy again, but wherever you are, my dude, I salute you. You sacrificed yourself for the greater good. If we are looking for a Medal of Honor recipient, I nominate him. Next story. My wife, she worked at a large prep/production kitchen that supplied product to multiple restaurants at an airport. They had to undergo regular NSF inspections, think standard health inspection but on steroids. And during the inspection, a large strainer of pasta was left in a prep sink under running water. Standard practice is to cool it quickly. Well, one of the dish guys casually walked over and began directly washing his hands in the running water that was flowing directly into the pasta in front of the NSF inspector. The pasta went straight into the trash and the dish guy was fired on the spot. Only time in the 8 years she worked there that she saw someone get fired for a single incident. All right, y'all, let me tell you something as your fellow narrator here, okay? Usually the video would end at this point, but we still got more, so hang in there. This is really long, but you know what? I am a voice actor and my throat can endure heavy-duty pounding. Yeah, I said that. Anyway, the next story. Okay, not a manager, but my friend is, and they fired the guy whose position I took because he was peeing on the floor in the factory, like next to the machine, in a 115 plus Fahrenheit, or 46 Celsius foundry. The dude was like 30 feet from a door to outside and around 100 feet from a bathroom. We work third shift, so it was like 12 a.m. What thought process went through his mind is completely unimaginable, as if I had the option to leave that room for literally any reason, it would take an actual gun to my head to prevent me leaving. And yet apparently, the urge to pee wasn't enough to move this guy. Next story. So this isn't a crazy story, but it was hilarious. I worked on a farm, and we had 2 new seasonal hires, young high school guys, and I say this as a veteran farmer who happens to be male. This was anecdotally the most consistently unreliable demographic. Now, one of our managers, a no-nonsense young lady, caught them showing each other adult content in the break room. She told them immediately to stop and that they apparently didn't know she was a manager, so they argued with her about whether or not it was adult content and then called her a B-word. We witnessed them flipping her off as we headed back to the field. It was a quick conversation. We said, normally this is more or a conversation, but you guys are 110% fired. Get your stuff right away and leave. Their parents ended up calling us upset that they were fired without a warning, and we had the pleasure of telling them what their kids did with their entry into the workplace. It was day 1. Next story. Had an auto electrician working for my car sales. He bought a car at a cost to help out his family. He was going to buy it back over a couple of months, but I was way too generous. Checked the registration of the car after a month. He had sold it 5 days after getting it. When I asked him to pay for the car, he said it had a lot of problems and he didn't want to pay for all of it or anything. Got the HR guy involved, sacked him. He had been stealing as well, never hiring anyone openly religious again.
OP, that's discrimination. Now, I'm not gonna pretend that it doesn't exist in the workplace, but don't say it out loud. Oh my god. Anyway, next story.
Okay, so I manage college students, so it's never anything totally egregious, but definitely first job, so they don't know better. But please take this as a learning experience. Mistakes. Now, had a student supervisor no-show for a shift last minute. Our facility cannot be open without at least one on shift. And he messaged saying he was having a family emergency. I covered part of the shift. He got another supervisor to come in to cover the rest. Later find out he had lied to attend an interview for another job. Again, these are college students, and if he had been transparent about the interview for a position post-grad, I would have 100% covered part of the shift for him without issue. But he was already on 2 out of 3 strikes, so I let him go and encouraged him to use better discretion in the future when time off is needed. Next story. Years ago, I worked as the lead managing a product photo studio inside of a warehouse. We shot guns. Sorry, I love that dumb joke, but yeah, we photographed guns. Everything from double-barrel pump-action 16-round shotguns to Tommy guns to crazy drum mag firearms. One day, I photographed a 10-barrel Gatling gun. I honestly don't care about firearms, but it was kinda cool. As you'd expect, it was a bit of a tight ship. Chill people, but metal detectors, security guards, and all of that. Our studio was in a cage with cameras all over, but I get it. Anyway, one photographer was a bit of an odd guy. I knew he was iffy, but he was a nice dude and most of the time was really productive and really great at his job. I knew he was a stoner and stuff, but so was I, so whatever. Well, I didn't know it was worse than that. On his last day, he came into work on some downer drugs. I don't know what, but he was out of it. He was so tired looking and nodding off. I gave him a little benefit of the doubt. Maybe he had a bad night, he had little kids, so maybe he was just tired. Well, another coworker came up to me and said, he is out in the gun aisles opening boxes. And I freaked. We obviously can't do this. We're not allowed into the actual warehouse, and out there are tons of guns and ammo. I ran out and found him. He opened some BB gun box, thank God that was it, but the gun was put together, and he was holding it. I was like, dude, what are you doing? And he was just so out of it, in a different world. I got a security officer to get him and take him outside, but he was fired immediately. I felt bad because I liked the guy, but I mean, you can't come to work effed up and play with guns in places you aren't allowed. Good lord. Later, I found out he was in rehab and stuff, so I felt worse for him and his family. Next story. A medical assistant was writing prescriptions for codeine syrup on a doctor's prescription pad that she stole. She looked up past patients that codeine had been prescribed to in the past so it wouldn't get flagged and had a friend pick up the prescription. Whenever the pharmacy would call to inquire about the increased codeine prescriptions, the assistant was the one to take the call and would either give the okay or not call the pharmacist in the back. Finally, a very determined pharmacist got a hold of the doctor after hours because the amount of codeine syrup was insane for a single person. When the doctor and pharmacist spoke, they worked out what had been happening. It was devious. And then the doctor spoke to police about it, and they said the only thing the medical assistant could be charged for was the cost of a replacement prescription pad. So stupid. Next story. My ex-girlfriend, she was a bad alcoholic and an elementary school teacher. I thought she was sober, but I was traveling for work a lot of the time, and she said she was doing good. Well, apparently she got so bad in a matter of 1 month that she started drinking vodka before class in the morning, and drinking throughout the school day. The school, of course, had no idea. One day, she tells her therapist about the issue, that she started drinking before/during work because the WDs were so bad. The therapist was legally obligated to inform the school because children were involved. She was fired the next day, and I broke up with her that same day. Then she went to rehab, and I don't know if it stuck this time. But that was 4 years ago. I haven't spoken to her since we broke up, despite her attempts. Plus, work took me to multiple other states for the next few years, so the relationship didn't make sense, and I didn't want to drag her around with me while worrying if I'd come home to a drunken mess every day. Next story. I had a guy who worked for me at a data center. I was a part of his hiring process, and we were friends. Me and my wife went to his church once. His back was bad, and he was in waiting for a surgery. He had a rough few months on pain meds and pain off and on. He wasn't the best form of them. Then he had the surgery and had a near-death complication and missed 10 months of work that we paid him for fully. And when he came back, the other guys on the team were not happy for who he had turned into, and I tried to point out who he had been and might be again. After all of that and us going around corporate to pay him for 10 months, he found a higher paying job and left. Okay, not a problem. I'm happy when people improve their lives. I'm happy if I played any small part in it. Then at the hospital when my daughter was born, I get a call from our VP that our NOC is close to all walking, and I find out my guy opened a page to the job he had and how much it made. Showed all the NOC guys and walked out laughing. I had to do what I had to do, which in the end, he had given his notice, and so we paid him for 2 weeks but turned his stuff off. But he never came back in the building again. But it hurt at a personal level. It hurt. Next story. Stalked a coworker using office cameras. This was during COVID. She was working in the building and he was remote from home. He wasn't her supervisor, shouldn't have had access to the cameras, and she had a boyfriend that worked there also. He would call her to tell her things or make comments about her work or on outfits she was wearing. She thought it was creepy but was fairly new and didn't want to make waves. She also didn't realize how he knew what was going on is he was basically watching her all day through the cameras. Finally, after a few weeks of harassment, she told her boyfriend, who passed it on up. He denied everything but had been sending her text messages which he deleted from his phone but couldn't from hers. Also, he deleted his user account to the video software, thinking that would delete the logs showing what he was doing. He finally tried to say that he was just looking out for her, and for instance would make comments on her clothes to help her be more professional. Our company often gives a lot of chances when others wouldn't, but he was way over the line. Next story. I was the manager of a pizza place. One day during a rush, one of the guys disappeared for a few. I didn't think much of it until one of our counter employees approached me, and she said, I think Scott may have stolen a beer. And she said he had gone out front, so I went out to look for him. Sure enough, he's sitting there on the curb in full uniform with his apron still on, beer in hand. I confronted him about it, and he told me he had gotten anxious and needed something to calm his nerves. I told him it was not okay and I needed him to go home. He got rides from his girlfriend, so I told him he needed to call her to pick him up early, and he practically begged me not to make him call her. And I told him he was welcome to call anyone else, but I couldn't let him come back in and keep working. And so I went back inside and let him make his call and work it out. I called our GM and told him what happened and looked at the camera footage which showed him clearly grab a beer right out of the cooler in front of customers and all. My GM said to me, "Make sure before he leaves he knows he's not welcome back in our store." So I went outside and told him that, and though he was 100% in the wrong, the shame I saw on his face makes me feel bad a decade later. I have wondered quite a few times over the years if he figured it out and got his life together. I sure hope he did. Next story. I was a night manager at a chain pharmacy in college in the 90s. One of our high school kid employees came into the store one night and he was off when he had a brand new girl behind the register. He introduced himself, went behind the counter, loaded up 4 shopping bags with about 100 cartons of cigarettes. He told the girl the store manager called him at home and asked him to bring them to one of our other locations a few miles away because they were running low. She was new, 16, and clueless, so she figured this was all fine. The genius then proceeded to go to that other store, take them inside, introduced himself as an employee of our store, and hatched the story that his mom bought them all but decided to quit smoking and wanted to return them for cash. So they called up my store, got me on the phone. I by then had figured out he took them, and they called the police and had him arrested on the spot. We got the cigarettes back, and he actually had the balls to come in and pick up his last paycheck, making veiled threats to no one in particular. Next story. Oh boy, do I have a doozy one. This girl got pregnant because her boyfriend was gonna leave her. He wanted kids, so he stayed with her. Excited, but she didn't want kids though, just him. Apparently, her plan was to get an abortion quietly and claim she miscarried. Now, they didn't live together, and she thought this was a great plan. That way, he would still stay with her after it, so it was a traumatic thing that would bind them, and he would hope to try again. But she got wrapped up in the happiness everyone was giving. People were helping her and getting excited. Coworkers were talking about a baby shower. So when she decided it was time to fake her miscarriage, it was too late for an abortion to be safe or reasonable to use the excuse of a silent miscarriage. The baby was simply too big. So her next plan, which she told a coworker and tried to get him to help her, was to antagonize a manager who was restricting what she could do for her safety per her doctor's notes by attempting to do the things she was restricted from doing, pushing him/getting up on him, and hoping he would push her off of him so she could stage a slip and fall, hopefully miscarry, and then sue the company/manager. She planned to get a payout as well as be free of the baby. The coworker she told was going to get paid on the side for being a witness backing her up. Problem is, it didn't work. Manager didn't fall for it. Her accomplice was nowhere in sight to be back up, and she called the cops trying to lie. But camera footage showed otherwise. She didn't know that the camera had that angle. She was aiming for a blind spot, but the manager had moved it slightly a week prior to catch the blind spot. So, doctor record shows she was in the wrong for attempting restricted unsafe tasks that were on file with the company, proving the manager had every right to block her from entering the production line. Then boyfriend came to the office and said, "I have a gun and know how to use it."
To the officer. Turns out he had a warrant, so boyfriend gets arrested. Girl tries to run, gets arrested for false reporting as well. Office fired her. Now, at the time, no one knew that was her plan, just that the events happened, right? So the cherry on top was that the coworker, who was supposed to be her trusted witness, complained about missing his huge payout from her due to her failure and ended up blabbering the whole plan to two others, who immediately reported it to the supervisor. In the one-on-one with the supervisor present, he spilled the beans, with the manager there to hear the whole horrid plan and confront him. He was fired as well. I can't imagine many things are worse, morally, than trying to use and kill your own baby for so much personal selfish gain. And in case y'all are wondering, she was immediately released. Boyfriend got out of jail. She ended up having the baby at his job site and apparently tried to run at the hospital after it was born. Boyfriend became addicted to cocaine? Meth? I don't know. He became a local homeless druggie. Her mom took the baby. The girl moved out of state, and we found all of this out from her best friend, who ended up getting hired separately and had no clue about the original events. The coworker friend got hired in construction by one of our customers, having seen equipment on the coworker's truck, but he stole materials, and last I knew, the customer was looking for coworker to do whatever good old country Texans do to thieves. Next story. Not a manager, but a son of a manager, so I hope this counts. My mom, she's a jewelry specialist and an inventory manager. Her coworker, 58M, had less than an appropriate relationship with 2 decades younger female subordinate, and others brought it to the store manager, but the company HR is kind of ass and looks the other way a lot of times when violations don't directly affect the sales. Now, this man was a divorcee with 3 adult kids, by the way. Then the female subordinate filed a sexual harassment complaint against him, and the district manager came in person to swiftly fire him after 1 week of the investigation. Now, while completely the correct decision, everyone thinks that she did it to spite him. They had some kind of argument a week prior. Meanwhile, the district manager asked my mom to find any excuse to fire the subordinate as soon as possible because of hosts of issues that she has been causing, inappropriate relationship or not. Next story. Audio engineer here. We supplied a bunch of PA systems for a bunch of pubs over a weekend in town while a festival was on. One particular venue paid to have an engineer in the venue all day. Contract was originally equipment supply only, and we were stretched quite thin as the employed engineers were working a stage in the park, so we hired in a freelancer to look after this venue that requested the engineer all day. Now, one of the employed guys took a trip over to this venue during a spot of downtime to check in with the freelancer, and they found the freelancer nowhere near the mixing desk, but instead on the dance floor, pint in hand with the itchy nose, throwing shapes on the dance floor, shouting louder than the PA. How the F we didn't get a complaint from the venue? I have no idea. That freelancer got their marching orders about 15 minutes later, and it only took 15 minutes as that's how long it took the boss to make his way over to the venue and turf him out. Boss knew a lot of people in the industry, and last I heard, the guy was working in a community center cafe, and his missus reconnected with nature by sacrificing a fox, taking on its identity, and flying through the woods in a harness with her boobs out. They were a very strange couple. Or they just had some effing cracking cocaine. All right, so actually not the weirdest story I've read. I got to be honest with you. But yes, we did it. We have made it to the end of the extra very long video. I haven't done a video of this length in quite a while. Sometimes the videos would be 2 hours and the recordings would be like 3 hours long. So I don't want to say I'm nostalgic, but oh my God, does my throat hurt. But guys, we've done it. Thank you all so much for sticking around. Thank you all so much for watching, commenting, and have a good one. Bye-bye.